Good morning, Nolan, Bitcoiner. Another episode of The Breakup, a show where we look at our relationship with money. We contrast the relationship between the fiat standard and the relationship people have with the US dollar, contrast that with the relationship Bitcoiners like myself have with Bitcoin, and try to squeeze out some insight into what we're all going through today. And really, I think, change the frame from selling your dollars for Bitcoin or buying Bitcoin with dollars and really talking about the psychology behind the relationships with money. So it has nothing to do with economics in the sense that what's the exchange rate, when's the price going to change, all these other things. And it's certainly not a debate about Austrian school versus modern monetary theory. This is not a political show like that, although we do talk about politics quite a bit, as we will today. But really, it's about the psychology engine that perpetuates each of these types of money into the future. And the argument on this show is that the psychology behind the dollar is just spent. There's not much of a future awaiting us with that as our fuel. And that Bitcoin offers a much better fuel in order to perpetuate a much better psychological force that can imagine and frame our future, which I'm doing. I wrote a book on different mining techniques that we're going to be using in the future, nuclear, geothermal, and things like that. So people like me definitely trying to architect the future with Bitcoin. And looking at the spent force of fiat is kind of a hobby of ours, and that's why I want to share this show with you. So every day I try to take a news story and put this contrasting frame: fiat standard, what future will that bring? Bitcoin standard, what future will that bring? So the show's about politics, the news, current events, and predictions into the future. So predictions important for me anyway, because if I say them out loud in public, which is what I'm using this forum for, I get to then judge those predictions in the past and adjust my reasoning a little bit. I'm a little sometimes weary that I've guessed quite a bit right in the past 2 years, so you tend to get a little too overconfident. So I hope this show can at least make sure I know when I don't predict things correctly. So if you ever find something I get wrong, please let me know. Very useful. I get things wrong all the time, though. Don't make it sound like it's going to be that hard. Like, try and find it. You'll find it. Today, we're going to be talking about a tweet that came out from a fellow named Garett Jones. Garett Jones is a macroeconomist at George Mason University. Just a side note, we often say macroeconomists on this show are really political. We make a distinction between microeconomics and macroeconomics. That's pretty academic. I just say economics and politics. And I think that covers the field a lot better than the distinction academia uses. So we'll call him a macroeconomist, but I think he's really a political scientist in a certain sense. He's just able to judge the main levers of money, like inflation and exchange interest rates. So Garett Jones, points out that as of now, based on all kinds of research about vaccine effectiveness and how much it's cut the death rate and all these other things, he pointed to an MIT review article published in October 2020 by a doctor named Eric Topol. And here's the headline: One doctor's campaign to stop COVID-19 vaccine being rushed through before Election Day. It's the main headline. Subheadline: How heart doctor Eric Topol used his social media account to kill off Trump's October surprise. Dated October 19th, 2020, so about 3 weeks, little less, before the election. And this was celebrated, right? This was celebrated. People said, wow, what a hero. Good thing Trump didn't get that win. It would have helped him get reelected had he delivered his October surprise vaccines before the election. So what Garett Jones points out is that now we have all this data about vaccine effectiveness, that the delay that was won against Trump and his plans to use the vaccine approvals to get reelected. So that delay looks like it cost about 100,000 lives based on all the charts and data we're getting from projections of effectiveness and all the stuff you hear about. Look at the vaccines, they work. Da, 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 da. And I think they do. I think they've certainly taken down the death rate, it looks like anyway. I don't know the risks. It looks like the riskiest vaccine ever made, but that's important to remember that we're not comparing this vaccine to other vaccines. The point is to compare it to COVID. So although the vaccine may look risky compared to other vaccines, it looks less risky than COVID running wild. So that's the proper comparison, I think. And it looks like here that the delay cost about 100,000 lives. So are we ever going to hear about what a problem this delay is? Are we going to do some soul searching and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have been so eager to stop this vaccine before the election, and maybe we should have said, well, it's a little bit beyond politics, maybe we should be nonpartisan about this, maybe we should think about each other more than the political angle and the points we're going to score for our tribe. Of course, that'll never happen, right? We're never going to have introspection around what happened. And the reason we're not going to have any introspection around what happened, and even this guy Eric Topol, now this guy Eric Topol, I don't know much about him. This is the doctor that his efforts are what stopped Trump from getting the vaccine out. So I went on his Twitter timeline to check it out, just to see if he was a partisan nutbag and what else was there. He doesn't look like it. I mean, he looks like a reasonable doctor that's doing his best. He's promoting he's criticizing the government for not having the rapid test distributed a long time ago, saying, finally, we're getting the rapid test around. I like to see that. That seems like a smart and out of the box, if you compare the standard orthodox thinking around how governments have been thinking around about mitigation of COVID. So it looks like I mostly agree with the guy. I didn't go that far into his stuff because I'm sure I would come up with stuff that I don't care about. He was really into the COVID day-to-day stats, and I'm not. So don't come to me for everyday COVID stuff. I don't care. I stopped paying attention to that a long time ago. This kind of stuff I pay attention to. But, what's going on in this country or whatever. I think anyone who lived through the New York City 2020 COVID experience just has a different sense of risk now. That was such extreme risk that was in the air at the time that everything else in the world seems a little less dangerous. Whether it is or isn't, I don't know. It's just how we interpret it. We can't quite jack up the fear meter like it was in March and April 2020 in New York City, which I was with my family. So why is it never going to change? Why should we not look to the media to have this introspection? Maybe we shouldn't have been so hard on the Trump administration when it came to the vaccines. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe it did cost us lives. Now, just admitting you're wrong is hard, so we shouldn't expect it for that reason. But the other reason is, really, it's the business model of these news organizations. Even a guy like the good doctor who cheered on this delay in vaccines because of the political benefit. All of these people belong to this business model. I do. Everyone does right now. There's no way around it. I a little less because I tried to not see anything and keep it out of my view. But of course, you can't. You go on Twitter. I don't consume any direct primary sources of fake news any longer, neither Fox nor CNN nor anything. And do not appear on those shows any longer. Used to go on those networks all the time, but never any longer. I prefer this medium of communication, and that's really where this has to head. So here's your general idea of how the dopamine machine works and how most of these media companies, this is all they're interested in, not any degree of how are we going to help these people. I'm not saying they're evil. I'm just saying everything's caught in this frame. So you get the dopamine, that's the excitement or the outrage about an idea. What happens is at that point, you're immediately vulnerable to confirmation bias. Me too. This is not you too, everybody. There's almost no one who isn't this way. That's how it works so well. So now you can build filters, and that's what I hope this show is, filters to stop this trend here as best you can. I mean, right away, you seek friendly sources. And if your friendly sources aren't the people telling you, maybe I'm wrong, they're not friendly sources necessarily. Everyone has to have a certain amount of humility when it comes to this future. Definitely this show as well about being able to predict the future. So whatever I tell you, I'm always going to follow it up just as a matter of habit. Maybe I'm wrong. Being in Bitcoin for so long has forced me to always say, maybe I'm wrong, because we get it right so often that we have to be a little more aggressive about keeping the door open to us being wrong. One reason why I do take some, not offense, but objection to Bitcoin toxic maximalism, although I'm a general fan and don't need to be convinced about the benefits and have heard all the arguments, and I'm friends with some of the most toxic people in Bitcoin and think what they're doing is great. My problem with extra toxicity is you don't always open yourself up to the right criticisms and the humility to say, maybe I'm wrong. You need to kind of say, maybe I'm wrong every day. Bitcoiners included, myself included. So even though you're getting all this information from the point of view of a Bitcoiner, important for us to say, maybe we're wrong. So you get the dopamine, opens you up to being vulnerable. You want more dopamine, so you're vulnerable to confirmation bias at that point because of the feeling. You seek friendly sources, and then those friendly sources frame, interpret, and help really put you back into the dopamine state of mind. So it becomes a recursive loop. You continue in the same vein as this. You want the same feeling. You want this and that. And with Trump, that was easy because people had Trump derangement syndrome. Nothing that Trump did could be good. That was the logic. That's how you got the dopamine, stopping Trump. You had doctors trying to stop Trump for the benefit that it would give him. And I think would even be open to saying that's what they were deliberately doing. They would rather delay the vaccine distribution because it would have helped Trump. Now, the problem with all of this is the business model is not going anywhere. Fox and CNN are not going anywhere today. I think the outrage business model is breaking down because there are more independent folks like myself. And I'm tiny, obviously, just starting at this job, but there are many people who are established doing this every day. And that's going to be a big part of the breakup. That's why I called the show The Breakup. We have to let go of all these institutions because there is no remedy. There is no fixing them. Fixing them is watching shows like this and watching independent people who you kind of know where they're coming from. There isn't any blend or I'm not trying to fool you. I start the show by saying I'm a Bitcoiner. I am a Bitcoiner, and you're going to get a Bitcoin worldview, and that's what I'm trying to contrast and share. It's here's the fiat world, here's the Bitcoin world. Ever wonder why when you ask us we don't want to sell, when are we going to sell, and we don't know what you're talking about? Well, that's why. It's a different worldview. None of us are selling for cash. It would be insane. No one's cashing out. What are you even talking about? There's no cashing out. Just like when would we stop watching independent content producers and go back to CNN? What are you talking about? No one's going to go back to CNN. It's finished. For most people who leave these places as sources of news, don't tend to go back. And it's usually a great feeling when you get out of this recursive loop of being constantly bombarded by these psychological, hypnotic operations. So this is just human nature, though. I don't think you're ever going to stop this exactly. You just need to stop a preying business model that has perfected its ability to chop up your mind and get you to agree to two things that are at absolute cross purposes as long as there's a bit of time between them and the overall incentives change and the tribal position changes. So that's usually how it works. All right, that's all I got for today. See you guys.